So I've been using the gfx50s Mark II for around 4 months now, and now that the honeymoon phase has passed, I have some thoughts. And yeah, this is not going to be pretty. As good as this camera is, I don't think it's for me. It might be for you though. And so today I want to talk about the pros and cons of this camera and why it's not for me. Yeah, it's a medium format camera. Obviously it's going to be good. 16-bit RAW files, like 500 stop of dynamic range. The gfx50s Mark II only have 50 megapixels, and that's still overkill for me. Only, yeah, right. And the files that are coming out of this camera is very beautiful. There's no doubt about it. Now that I have one of the best cameras the market has to offer, I can't really blame the camera for my incompetence anymore. Is there a medium format look? If I'm being honest with myself, I don't really see it often. But I'm using mostly shit lenses, so maybe don't listen to me. Sometimes I think the magic hits, but most of the time it just feels like another digital file to me. The Metacon 65mm is the most potential lens for the medium format look, but honestly I'm just not very excited to find out. This camera is already quite cumbersome for me, and we'll get into that. But adding another kilogram worth of glass is just going to break my neck or something. The camera has IBIS, which I think is essential. It opens up so many doors to creative compositions and low-light capabilities. The ergonomics of this camera is great. For the weight and size trade-off, you get a very large, very comfortable grip. It really feels like you are holding a substantial tool on your hands. And that brings me to the first con of this camera. It's freaking heavy. My neck and shoulder is really hitting me right now. I think I probably won't last 2 weeks shooting with the Metacon 65. My feeble body already has enough problems as is. I like to wear my camera on my neck around all day when I'm shooting, and this is just not the camera for that. I was pretty miserable on my mountain hike trip, and I was also pretty miserable on my trip to China. And now that the novelty of medium format has worn off, I don't think I can deal with this lifestyle anymore. The bulk of the camera is one problem, but the other problem is the lenses. Good lenses are just going to be heavier and bulkier as well. And I'm not even using the big heavy native glass yet. I really underestimated this aspect of a camera system. This led me to bring bigger backpacks, which led to more weight on my bike, and that led to less enjoyment on my life. Another thing is this camera is overall not very stealthy. It might just be a psychological thing, but I think it brings a lot of attention to me when I'm out shooting on the street, especially on lesser touristy places. I prefer to have a person here or there on my photos, and the GFX setup feels very intimidating to use. Next is the manual focus experience. I thought it would be more fluid with the dual screen option on this camera. Maybe with a better EVF, the dual screen would be more useful. But as it is, I still have to do the old picking plus magnification routine, and I really don't like doing that if I can. This camera is 50 megapixels, so I have to be even more careful with my focusing. The Nikon ZF is, I think, the most interesting camera right now for manual focusing, and so I'm quite interested in that. The Leica SL2 I think has a really big EVF as well, but I'll probably need another pair of kidneys to afford that shit. I like the look of vintage lenses, and I think the Voigtlanders I used to use have a very nice rendering. And so I think my next camera has to have a really good manual focus experience. This camera doesn't have the ISO and shutter speed dial, which really is my preferred way to shoot these days. And it's a shame because it's a Fuji camera, you know, you'd think that it would have these nice vintage dials. I find the auto ISO implementation of this camera very annoying. On my old Sony cameras, I can just have a button that changes the auto ISO minimum shutter speed, and then I never really have to change the ISO. With Fuji, you can have these 3 presets. I set one for 1/60, one for 1/250, and one for 1/15. I can never remember which one that I'm on. If I have to change the ISO often, I prefer just have the physical ISO dial so I can manually choose the ISO. But alas, the gfx50s Mark II doesn't have that. They discontinued the 50R body, which I think is the better way to do photography. And this body is more of a work/video-centric body with the PASM dials. But there are no video features here, so it's just kinda dumb. There are no dedicated exposure compensation dials either. You just have this little dinky button over here. And that is so annoying. It always takes me some time to find the button. The default way to use this, you have to hold this button and then change the control wheel, which I find very annoying. I found an option in the menus that let me just press it once and then I can change the dials, which is a little bit better but still not great. The metering of this camera can be also quite unpredictable, and that's why it's very annoying to not have a physical exposure compensation dial. I wish I have highlight weighted metering. I think it's one of the more underrated features of cameras these days. It's both useful when I want to shoot more low-key photos, and it prevents the camera from clipping the highlights. My most vivid memory of this is my trip to China recently. The light was very harsh and very bright, and I often want to shoot silhouettes. And it's just not very easy to do that with this camera. I think most cameras these days have really good dynamic range and shadows recovery, and highlight weighted metering would be one of the features that make use of that. The EVF is just okay. I find it kinda dim and lacking in resolution somehow. And I'm not the only one in this. Again, I shoot with manual lenses, and again I wear glasses. So I actually have quite a bit of demand for a good EVF. There's a weird downside of this camera that you probably didn't think about. This camera kinda boxed me in this corner to have good images. And sometimes I want my large coarse grain and my character in my photos. And this camera counterintuitively prevents me from doing that. Intentional motion blur? Blasphemy. Using ISO above 100? Sacrilegious. Shooting a photo of the dumpster. Why are you even here? And I think my point is, this camera is always whispering to my ears, "No, this is not how you use me, you talentless donkey." And I think I wouldn't have these thoughts if I had a more humble setup. So in a way, a less capable camera would be way more freeing. I guess it doesn't really make sense. It's just a camera and use it however you want, but still, it's just a psychological thing for me. The lenses for this camera is heavy and expensive and quite limited. I like shooting with small, fast manual focus lens, like the M-mount stuff, and I think it's a nice trade-off of not having autofocus, and there are just nothing like that for this camera. The 50 f3.5 is the smallest pancake lens for this system, and it's still like over 300 grams. This day I like shooting with a 40mm, and having a fast 40 would be very versatile. My ideal setup would probably be like a fast 40, and then a 24-105 for any landscape needs, and that would be like all I need, which I can't really get with the GFX cameras. And if you watch my previous video, I tried adapting a lot of 35mm lenses on this system, but that experience always leaves something to be desired, and it's more of a hobby than anything. It's like something you could, but should you? And I really went deep into that rabbit hole, and I was having more fun finding lenses than shooting them. In the end, once the novelty of medium format fades, I just realized that this camera is not very fun to use. I often have this fear of taking this camera out sometimes because it's just so heavy. There are just a lot of small things that prevents me from enjoying photography with this camera. As good as this camera is, a full frame camera with some great lenses probably will get you just as far these days. And photography for me is a hobby first and foremost. And so the enjoyment is very important to me. More important than image quality, more than megapixels. The camera has to stay out of my way. And it has to, I don't know, spark joy. With the GFX, I just seem to keep fighting it with the small things. And the weight and the size. In the psychological aspect and yada yada. And so if I'm not having fun with the process, then what's the point then? And that's when I realized that this has to stop. Let's not make this breakup longer and more messy than it needs to be. I have had this medium format allure calling my name for a few years now, and I'm glad I got to experience it. But I think it's time to get this camera into more capable hands and out of my hands. In retrospect, the most enjoyment with photography I've had for the last few years is when I had the Leica M8. The camera just sparks joy for all its faults. I could just stay out on the street for hours and just shooting away with that camera. And so the look for the next camera continues. Maybe my next camera won't be a Leica, but I know now that enjoyment is the first thing I have to look for. Any camera made in the last 15 to 20 years is going to take more than good enough photos. The GFX is a great camera, don't get me wrong. It takes stunning photos. I think it's just not for me. But maybe it's for you, and I hope this video helps you decide if it is. I think I found my next camera now, but I guess you'll have to subscribe to find out.